Hey, what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. Subscribe to Saturday Down South on YouTube. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, the first playoff poll is out, and everyone agrees on everything. Happy Wednesday morning. Certainly, there was nothing in there that happened last night with the 6 people that were able to watch it and watching it on like Fubo or something like that. Certainly nothing happened that, riled the masses, right?
Bold take by ESPN to take the, as I always call it, the meeting that should be an email, the playoff committee show,
Yes.
and take that off of, YouTube TV, because it's like, now it's a tweet. It was hard to get me to watch that before, but now I'm like, cool, I'm just going to watch everyone's reaction on Twitter, because the people that are part of, the show itself are not really who I'm trying to hear reactions from. And, as far as the reaction itself, classic SEC bias, Notre Dame getting favorable treatment, those Fighting Irish from Mississippi. So, just typical ESPN for you.
Yeah. I do think that Notre Dame's ranking was the most significant thing that happened. If you didn't see this, 2-loss Notre Dame coming in at number 10 was relevant because obviously Miami coming in at Miami's like 18th or something, coming in 8 spots ahead of Miami, even though obviously Miami beat Notre Dame in the season opener. Significant also because you've got an at-large team that cannot obviously be one of the 5 highest ranked conference champs, who now looks like it definitely does just have to win out. And like, hand up, I said after they lost the second game, I thought Notre Dame was cooked. This ranking reflects that Notre Dame is very much not cooked. And if they win out, which would include a win against Pitt, which would be, a top 25 win and add a little bit to the resume, then like Notre Dame is somehow fine, even though if you look at their combined conference records of the power conference teams that they beat, 6-20. 6-20. And everybody's just like, well, Notre Dame passes the eye test. Well, they kind of struggled against Boston College this past weekend, but nonetheless, Notre Dame was what had people the most upset, which actually, you know what, that feels right. That's what should have people the most upset.
Yeah, I do truly at this point feel for, I got a lot of Miami buddies and some of them that listen to this podcast. One of my buddies was breaking down the other day how like Virginia scheduled NC State out of conference and it doesn't count as a conference game. It's like, as weird as your situation is, BU even Notre Dame, what they got going on in the ACC is weirder. And we kind of forget about them because it's like not Dabo or FSU or whatever. But this is the weirdest ACC year in kind of a while, which is saying something.
Yeah, it definitely is. Very, very weird. No idea how it's all going to shake out. But man, I even just the whole playoff poll with all of the 2-loss teams. I think there's like 11 or 13 2-loss teams that are in the top 25, and they were getting into 2-loss teams early on. And as someone that doesn't fill out the AP poll, I don't sit there and fill it out. I just criticize the people that do. I'd admittedly kind of forgotten about how many 2-loss teams were in there and how fascinating it is to see the selection committee basically decide this is a resume that we value and this isn't. And I think for Oklahoma and Texas being in that 2-loss conversation, they're now set up really well. And it was interesting hearing Steve Sarkisian. I saw this tweet from CJ Vogel talk about how he thinks a 9-3 team from the SEC should get into the college football playoff. And I was like, oh yeah, just throw that in there. But I do look at those early rankings and wonder, do Texas and Oklahoma have the best path to do that, given what remains on their schedule? Because like there is a scenario in which 9-3 Texas or 9-3 Oklahoma could be in. And I don't know that I would have said that until I saw them come in at that 11-12 line. By the way, they would be the first 2 teams out if the playoffs started today, because you need to have, the ACC conference champ, the highest ranked group of 5 team, all that stuff in there. But I thought that was an interesting development as well.
Yeah, it's not repeating yourself if it feels like new information, right? And I feel like I have to keep being like, because I'm there with you as far as, Notre Dame season's over, what happened in the early season. Like, same deal with Texas, right? Which is why I'm making that point, is like, we saw Texas look bad for like a month plus, and it was like, this is not a good team. They will not be making the playoff. They'll be lucky to, recruit off of this and continue their momentum from last year going and right the ship. And then now you kind of look up and it's like, oh yeah, like we're still kind of, despite our best efforts of hitting these same notes, stuck in that mindset, because nothing that really happens in, September, like late August at points, right? None of that stuff ends up actually mattering if you can turn your season around, a la Alabama losing to FSU. And I had not to bring that all up again, but it's like that loss is going to not matter at all by the end of the year.
Yeah, and Alabama having 4 wins against teams that are currently in the playoff top 25 carries a bit more weight. carries a bit more weight. It's about who you beat, and people get caught up in the quality of loss a little bit too much. Maybe that's probably, to bring it back to Notre Dame, why Notre Dame is actually still getting the benefit of the doubt, because people look at their losses as, oh, well, down to the wire game against Miami, down to the wire game against Texas A&M, could have gone either way. A Tyler Buckner hold here, a call on a holding play there, and who knows? But like, that's not the world that we're supposed to live in. Nonetheless, first playoff poll is out. Great to have it back on a Tuesday night. But you're right. Could have been an email. Definitely could have been an email. Great
Free
pod coming up
yourselves
today.
from the bonds of the playoff selection show, folks. Go walk your
Yeah,
dog, have a nice dinner with your family, and just look at the tweet. You didn't miss anything, did you?
Of all the things to seek different streaming options for, I'm thinking of all the different things right now, like that I don't have them, without YouTube TV. Like, can't pull up Bluey for Claire or something like that, who, by the way, is homesick. If you hear her in the background today, just know that it's her. And your boy is also at very much less than 100% because I got whatever she had, and I've been dealing with it for the last 24 hours. So nothing that I say here today can be used against me. But of all the things that I think, I would love to be able to have YouTube TV with full ABC Disney access back to, the playoff ranking show is dead last on that list.
Yep.
It just is.
Exactly.
All right. So we have a great pod coming up today. We have week 11 games to get to. Not the best slate, but plenty of intrigue that we will break down and discuss with the 5 SEC games that we're talking about today. Ryan Brown of the Next Round is going to join us in a bit. We'll talk a lot of Auburn things, some Ty Simpson, Jon Sumr, all that. And then we're going to close with Lad of the Week. But first, a quick word from our friends at Dabble. Guys, I've been talking about Dabble for a really, really long time. It is such a great time on the sports calendar. And if you're into daily fantasy, Dabble is the place to do it. It's one of the newest and best apps in the daily fantasy space. They've wasted no time making a name for themselves. Dabble's social function is second to none. They offer a wide variety of sports making picks, including college football, NFL, NBA. Laura and I were just looking at tickets for little Pacers Magic on a Sunday afternoon. Now that NBA is back in full swing, maybe take Claire to her first Magic game, do stuff like that. Dabble is a great place to get in on the action. Use promo code SDS2 when you sign up today. Receive $25 in bonus cash. No deposit required. Again, that is promo code SDS2 for $25 in bonus cash, courtesy of the good folks at Dabble. All right, well, week 11. Let's start with number 5, Georgia, 7.5-point favorites against Mississippi State. The over-under I have is 18 Gunnar Stockton pass attempts when the scoring margin is within 7 points. Does that make sense when I say that? When the scoring margin is within 7 points, like either way. So it can be, as long as it's not, an 8-point game, and that Georgia is up by 7 or Mississippi State's up by 4. That's all, within 7 points we're talking about here.
That's simple. I'm just interested by the stat that you're going to follow it with. It seems very specific.
Yes. And it's, it ended up being a little bit more ironic than I thought it was going to be. He is averaging 18 pass attempts when the scoring margin is within 7 points per game. Okay. That seems like a lot because it is. He's attempted 77 passes when Georgia is down between 1 and 7 points. It's 7th among power conference quarterbacks. In 2021-2022, when Stetson Bennett IV was Georgia's full-time starter, and he played in 30 games, 30 games it was, I think. He had 76 such attempts in those 2 combined seasons.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And here we are, Gunnar Stockton already at 77 in that spot when Georgia's down between 1 and 7 points. So to recap, Gunnar Stockton already has more pass attempts this season in games that are within a touchdown in those spots than Stetson Bennett had in Georgia's 2 national title winning seasons. Okay.
So that's because there are fewer opportunities. That's more about fewer opportunities, or is it about the offense?
More about fewer opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Fewer opportunities, just way different game flow, what to expect week to week. And, it's pretty amazing to think that he's had so many of these opportunities. And why do I bring that up? Am I trying to say that Stetson Bennett wasn't clutch or that he wasn't asked to be clutch? No, that's not the case at all. He's one of the most clutch players that we've ever had in the history of college football.
He did a ton of those opportunities, I feel. Yeah.
Yeah. It just shows you like how different this game is now compared to even just a few years ago at Georgia, and what we should go in expecting week to week. There's a lot of evidence that this game, with Georgia traveling to Starkville with a 7.5-point spread, will have plenty of moments in which it's a 7-point game or less. In average scoring margin in conference play, these teams are 3rd and 14th in the SEC. Totally opposite ends of the spectrum, but Georgia is at plus 7.2 points per SEC game. Mississippi State averaging -7 per SEC game. In home games this season, Mississippi State beat Arizona State, and it led at the 2-minute timeout against the likes
Everyone
of
else.
Tennessee and Texas. Yeah. Yeah. Against the 2 UTs and everyone else. The Cowbells will be rocking, but will they be rocking enough to do something that has not been done in the post Mike Leach era? You think that I'm about to say like, oh, they haven't beat Georgia in the post Mike Leach era. They haven't like beat like a ranked team in the SEC. No. I am saying that in the post Mike Leach era, Mississippi State is 0-10 in SEC games at Davis Wade Stadium. Think about that. 2 wins at Arkansas.
Oh my gosh. That
Right?
is like, I mean, like when we think about what college football is, right? And we think about, okay, the pageantry, the tailgates, like the fraternities, sororities, going to the game. You talked about this like at your time in Indiana back before they were a football power. How it's like, oh, we're going to see each other. We're going to have a good time. We're going to kind of go home. Like the fact that people have just not had a good time for that long is really rough. They deserve a good time in Stark Vegas.
They do. And for what it's worth, I'm not breaking any news to the great fans of Mississippi State football. Okay. Y'all are well aware of that. Is anyone on the outside, maybe with the exception of an Ole Miss fan who likes to troll, aware of that? Because that is a long time. That is a long time to go without a home win in conference play. And we're actually recording this on the 3-year anniversary of the last time that Mississippi State won an SEC game at home. Will, $20 for you if you can name the coach that Mississippi State beat in that game in 2022.
I'm going to guess Mark Stoops. Who is it?
That's a good guess. It is the one and only Cadillac Williams.
Oh my gosh, I remember that game.
Overtime.
Yep, it sure was, man.
Yep. And post Brian Harsin era, Brian Harsin had just been fired. That was the last time that Mississippi State won an SEC home game. I mean, that's crazy to think of. Technically the home SEC losing streak began during the Mike Leach era, and ironically enough, Georgia is the team that got it started nearly 3 years ago. So 11 in a row is technically where that streak is at for SEC home games. Mississippi State. Look, I don't think that Georgia is the team that they watch that streak end against. Okay. But I can sell myself on this being a 7-point game, like we talked about, wherein the Bulldogs, the home Bulldogs, cover because they can do some of the things that Tennessee did to put pressure on Georgia downfield. So I'm thinking like Georgia trails 14-10 at half. Cowbell's rocking once again, and Gunnar Stockton makes big time plays in those moments. I feel like a broken record. I say that every single week with these Georgia games. That's how they're all playing out. I think Georgia fights back and wins this one 28-21.
Yeah, it's almost like the secret government that's in control of college football is just making things as entertaining as possible at this point, because that's the only through line in some of these situations that we can see, that you're going to get a close game, right? Like there are teams, and Mississippi State is such a great example of this, of they played up or down to their competition. And I do want to say, you talk about the home losing streak. As all things are kind of becoming, that's also a pretty sad Arkansas stat, right? Where it's like, okay, well, you did beat Arkansas on the road twice. You went into their building, but yet you couldn't win at home. Yeah, I mean, I would think that in this game, and I feel like I've said this before a couple of times with Mississippi State, and I remember saying this about Carson Beck last year, where it's like, hey, you need to run your offense, or not Carson Beck. It was Carson Beck, and it was also the Texas game for them against Mississippi State, where I was like, this is the game where you need to be in control and run your offense and do things your way. Georgia's been a little bit different, though, because it's not that they haven't been able to get on track on offense. It's almost like their defense needs to find that spark and that identity and play with like a little bit of, I hate to say pride. They've been a very strategic, smart defense, but they haven't had the game records like we talked about. They haven't had the big plays. So I would look for, against this offense, Georgia to take a lot more risks. I think this is a great game for Georgia to send a lot of like exotic blitz packages and get their guys feeling momentum defensively, because this has proven to be an offense that can't really burn you. And when they do, you always have a chance to come back. So I think that now that Georgia is this offensive football team, a la kind of the end of Stetson Bennett's career, it's like, well, if we're not going to be a great, 10-0 defense, we might as well just have fun out there and try to squish this team and crush their will. So I hope we get kind of a more free, fun Georgia defense and then make a statement in this game. Let's look for about 3 sacks, I would say, in this one, couple turnovers. And I actually think Georgia pulls away early in this one and controls this game just because I think they've had enough stress. I think at some point, if Georgia's going to be this great team that we've talked about, they need to pull away in a game like this. And again, Mississippi State, like we said, has had the history of keeping things close. But if you're Georgia, at some point, it's like we can't be close with everybody. Our backups are getting tired, man. We gotta just take a chill pill here.
I do agree with you that I think Georgia will view this matchup that way. The one thing I'll push back on, you said Mississippi State doesn't have the guys that can burn you. Brennan Thompson can burn you. He can absolutely burn you. He might be the fastest player, not just in the SEC, but in all of college football. The Oklahoma transfer has been kind of exactly what Blake Shapen needed as a downfield target to stretch the field, to allow this Jeff Lebby offense to operate in the way that it needs to. And I do think that there's risk in him doing the things that in a very different way from a physical standpoint in the way that they're built, but doing some of the things that Chris Brazzell did in that Tennessee game where you're like, man, how is this guy in single coverage on a safety over the top? Like, what are they doing here? And you would think that ideally you're trying to attack Blake Shapen in this offensive line that's had issues. He's had frustration with this issue. Like, go back to that A&M game, albeit against an A&M defensive line that can absolutely get after the quarterback, but where he's just like, man, I have no time. I don't know what I'm doing. And the Kamario Taylor move that Jeff Lebby has been making in some of these games kind of feels like his way of trying to combat some of that and to get a little bit of that spark going. I would expect to see that in a game like this. You're going to try and do all these different things to be able to trick Georgia because, let's be honest, you're going to have to trick Georgia. You're going to have to hit on some of these chunk plays, some of these busting coverage if you're going to be able to beat this team, which has been good, but not necessarily great. I keep pulling up the Max Olson stop rate and expecting one day I'm going to see Georgia this season. And that day has not come yet. At least I don't think it has, at least in the top 20. And it's bizarre, but you have to be able to rely on kind of some of those offensive principles that have worked for you so far. But yeah, I still trust Georgia. I trust Georgia to be able to find a way. But if Mississippi State all of a sudden wins this game to clinch bowl eligibility, they're not building a Jeff Lebby statue, but Jeff Lebby will have gone from potential hot seat going into year 3 to, hey, show me that extension. I just tripled our win total. I got us to the postseason. That's what's at stake for him.
I'll be looking forward to the Bulldog social media post if that happens. Yes, and I would just say, like, to clean that up, like, you're right. They do have some dudes on offense, but it's more about finding that consistency. And I can kind of see 2 game scripts here, right, where Mississippi State is known to kind of turtle in these moments. It's that it has looked good when it's looked good, but when they're anti-Georgia is exactly what they are. They're anti-Georgia. When it doesn't matter, they're awesome, except against Arkansas, which, like we said, doesn't count. And so, like, they've been in these moments, and then kind of at the end of these games where it's time to pull ahead or to answer, they start to kind of turtle, like I said. And we've seen the changes in the offense, and I think I can give Lebby credit for some of that stuff. So, like, if these teams stay the same as they have, it's a back and forth game where Georgia just puts their foot on their neck late. Whereas if I'm Georgia, I'm trying to avoid that. Like, we shouldn't be in a back and forth game with Mississippi State. So therefore, I'm going to take more chances because you're right. Like, they have some of those dudes, but if you're Georgia, you got to at some point trust the back end of your defense and go, hey, we'll give up one here or there, but we're Georgia,
Agreed. Mississippi State winning this game would totally shake up the SEC picture, but don't quite think it happens in this one. Number 3, Texas A&M, 7-point favorites against number 19, Mizzou. Do you think the odds makers just make all of these games? They're just like, hey, touchdown favorite. Just touchdown favorite in the SEC. That's just kind of the way to go this year, and you'll have a lot of action. The over-under I have is 4 Texas A&M sacks. That is what the Aggies are averaging. Best in America. We just talked about how good they've been at getting after the quarterback. Not just Cassius Howell, though he's got 9.5 sacks, 6 more than anybody on that A&M team.
Cassius Howell.
He really, go ask LSU fans like yourself about Cassius Howell. And sorry, that was rude. I'm
here telling you. You don't got to say LSU. That's why I know. That's a great. Would you take him over Nick Scorton?
Oh, heck yeah. Heck yeah. And I loved me some Nick Scorton coming in. I thought that move was really, really smart. And it was kind of one of the reasons why you need to be aggressive in the portal, especially for a guy that had local roots coming from Bryan there. And I do think that he didn't necessarily live up to my expectations down the stretch. And I don't know if he was playing through a couple of different things or if he was just playing out of position. That was something that was talked about during the combine. But what Cassius Howell has done is kind of what I thought Nick Scourton was going to do on the Mike Elko defensive line.
That's kind of where I was going there. I didn't want to be the one to say it, but it's like the Mike Elko kind of evaluation on defense, buddy, is second to none right now. The way that he has taken guys who were good players and turned them into great players. We talked about Torian York, Shamara, some of the dudes that are already on the roster that he has elevated, and then he's brought in these creatures and put them exactly where they need to be.
Dayon Hayes. I just butchered your name, Dayon Hayes. Dayon Hayes. He's been awesome. And that's like my first time saying his name on this show, and that's probably unfair. He's another one of these guys that came in, spent 4 years at Pitt, and then was at Colorado for a year, but got the medical redshirt because he only played in 4 games last year and was hurt. It was was considered a big loss at the time for Colorado. He's a 24-year-old in year 6 playing college football, and it shows. Like, he's been really, really good, and I expect you're going to hear his name a decent amount in this game. You've got a true freshman starting at quarterback from Mizzou and Matt Zollers. This is his first career start, and I'm going to just say, he doesn't have to say this, I'm going to say it for him. He probably would have liked to have had his first career start come against a non-Texas A&M defensive line.
Literally anyone else, honestly. Give me Ohio State, really. At this point of the season, there's nobody scared here right now that Texas A&M on that defensive front.
Yeah, very, very good. And maybe A&M will be on its heels and kind of struggling to adjust to someone who has very limited film, having only thrown 29 passes at this level, 23 of which came last week in that game against Vandy. That's the good news for Mizzou. And that's, if you're selling yourself on a Mizzou victory, it's the element of surprise. It's hoping that your guy who's going to roll out there and be able to do some things on that end that make the Texas A&M defense go, I don't know. We can't really figure this out. We can't really find the ways in our defense to be able to account for that.
It's and we'll talk about this with LSU a little bit later. It's if I don't know what I'm going to do, how can you know what I'm going to do?
It's a good point. It's a good point. Like we've seen that. That's been a theme in college football this year, and there could be an element of that in this game. And you've got a couple of weeks to be able to prep, and that's the good news for Mizzou after the Bo Pribula injury. Perhaps some fresh legs as well for Ahmad Hardy, who has still 90 more yards after contact than any power conference back. It's just insane, the body of work, even as he's kind of cooled off and those Heisman conversations have been pushed to the back burner. What one would think in this game with a true freshman starting at quarterback, he's going to be relied on a ton, because the best way to neutralize a great pass rush is to run the football. A tale as old as time. I don't know that you can assume that you'll run the ball on A&M, but I do think it's at least possible. It's been kind of weird this year with some of their run fits. They allowed 268 on the ground in that Arkansas game, which had Mike Elko livid. As we talked about, he didn't want to hand out any defensive awards after that game. It was like, nobody earned one after this one. No defensive player of the game. They allowed 203 on the ground in the opener against UTSA. And sandwiched in between that was going into South Bend and holding maybe the best running back in college football in Jeremiah Love to 3.5 yards per carry. Or he had 4 yards per carry, and Notre Dame finished with 3.5. And he really had to work for those 94 rushing yards he had in that game, 72 of which were after first contact. His longest run in that game was 16 yards. He did have the big play in the passing game. Ridiculous one-head and grab. He's a special player. But here's why I'm bringing up a game that happened like 2 months ago. Notre Dame struggled with those zone runs. 19 of them from Jeremiah Love that game. After they basically said, we need to throw out our week 1 game plan for Miami. We need to come up with a way that we think will have A&M on its heels. And they scored a ton of points. They were able to do that. But I think they would have preferred to have more of those chunk plays in the ground game. They really could not get that with going up against that A&M front, which we didn't know how good it was at the time. And it's proven to be really, really good. I would guess that Ahmad Hardy on extra rests with a true freshman quarterback, A&M is going to expect to see a lot of those zone runs. Okay, like that's kind of what you do when you're Mizzou. I think even on the road, the Aggies will handle it enough to win a close game. Mizzou, who has not beaten an AP top 10 team in the regular season in the playoff era, again, have not beat an AP top 10 team in the regular season in the playoff era. Something that maybe we need to start talking about a little more, as Mizzou has had a standard raised in Como. But I think ultimately the Aggies backdoor cover late, They win this one 27-17. A game that feels closer than that, and they're going to improve to 9-0. They officially move past the 8-4 jokes.
Yeah, and I love that you hit on this, right? Because in terms of the Bo Perbula injury, the people that are the most affected are obviously Bo Perbula, who got injured, Drink, who obviously has seen his season kind of take a step back. They're a little bit on the brink right now. Then number 3, Ice Pack Ahmad Hardy, a guy who is so effective with Bo Perbula, especially in the early season, because of the threat of not just his legs, but the pass, the 3-headed running attack that we love so much against Kansas. And now, like, all those elements are just starting to be kind of stripped away. And it's just Ahmad Hardy sitting there, and he's like, it's like the Popeyes meme or the Jimmy Butler meme, hands on hips. Like, what do you want me to do here, coach? I got Cassius Howell right there. He's barking at me. He's speaking a language that was said by the Nordic gods. I don't know what's going on here. Why are you making me do this? And so that being said, I mean, I think everyone in that stadium is going to know, Texas A&M defense included, what Mizzou's key to this game is. It's not to put the ball in their young quarterback's hands. And you're right. It is a little, there's nuance, especially in modern college football, to the concept of a front seven, right? Because look at a team like Alabama. I think they have good pass rushers and they create havoc, but you can run on them, as we've seen, more of exploiting the interior of that defense. A&M is a version of that, but a more sound version of that for sure against the run. And I think part of that comes, and just hear me out here. Like, Mike Oko is so smart that I think chaotic teams kind of like break him in a way. You talk about Arkansas again. Taylor Green is the king of, if I don't know what I'm going to do, how do you know what I'm going to do? If Mike Elko can prep against a team, you've seen what he can do, right? But to your point, if they can kind of, change some of the stuff the way Notre Dame did, if it's in the early season, if it's something that he hadn't been able to get film on, and tell his guys, this is exactly what to expect, this is how you stop it. Like, he's the best at, or he's great at prep and he's great at adjustments, and it just depends on what part of it you're going to get. So I think Mizzou definitely needs to be multifaceted, but to your point, maybe they just don't exactly have the horses to do that. So I think it's going to be big game for like Kirby Moore and their offensive game planning, because they're going to need to basically find some of these cheap ways to keep the Texas A&M defense honest, and not just be like, hey, dude, we're sending 7 on every play. Come beat us.
Mazars, you're going to take some hits, man. You're going to take some hits. How you hang in the pocket and deliver some of these throws when it's 3rd and 8, that could define this day for Mizzou. You're not showing up against A&M and being the guy who's got happy feet in the pocket and trying to, it's thrown away and not being able to make a play, or you're running for your life. This team is too good in pursuit, and they will make this a long day if that's kind of the mindset. By the way, on the other side of the ball, I saw this tweet from Colin Simmons, different than the one who haunts quarterbacks for Texas, different Colin Simmons. He's a Mizzou student reporter. He quoted Jalen Catalon, who is captain of the How Is He Still in College team. Jalen Catalon being in year 7 is crazy to me. Like, he's been doing this almost the entire time that we've been having a podcast. And I feel like we've been talking about him for a very long time.
I was about to say, I was like, hold on, I think continue.
Yes, Jalen Catalon, the 1995 safety, who is just he's Bob Sanders. He's Bob Sanders light. Yeah, very much so. But he said that in regards to stopping Marcel Reed, we just have to make him play quarterback. My guy, Marcel Reed's playing some quarterback this year. Okay. Best quarterback rating in the SEC on intermediate throws, 10 to 19 yards. He's taken 6 sacks on 258 dropbacks. He's got 5 touchdown passes with a 96.1 NFL quarterback rating under pressure, with Joey Aguilar being the only SEC quarterback who's better in those 2 areas. He has been tremendous passing against the blitz. Not a high volume passing attack, but still, he's been perfect for what Mario Craver, Casey Concepcion needed. Guy that can buy time and wants to keep his eyes downfield. He is not I'm just going to tuck it and run type of guy. He can scramble, and he's very good at that, but that is not necessarily his first read. Maybe Catalon, the focus was a bit blunt, and he's essentially saying they're trying to do what Auburn did when Reed took more sacks in that game, 4, than he had positive rushing attempts. Maybe he's trying to say, like, we would like to do that. Yeah, I agree. That would be really good. Easier said than done. Probably some words that'll come back to bite him.
Yeah, like that's the thing that if you are a great team, you say internally. Because like technically, I don't hate that approach because the scariest thing about Marcel Reed is for sure his legs, right? Where he makes one little like hezzy move and he's gone. And so as a defense, you always need to be accounting for that. And then therefore, if he's not running downhill on you, it can be seen as kind of a win. Now that being said, if you are Mizzou, you don't really exactly have the personnel to expose him. And furthermore, if you did, you don't want to quote like that getting out during the week. Because a guy like Mike Oko, who's been seen to be a little bit petty, a guy like Colin Klein, who is an offensive genius, can just go ahead and say, I'm going to give him 40 pass attempts today just because I can at some point in this game. If we're looking up and we're up 3 scores or, your quarterback is underwater and you're Mizzou, it's like, why would we not just chuck it around the yard here and get Marcel Reed to take fewer hits,
Mizzou's got a great pass rush with Zion Young, Damon Wilson II. What those guys have been able to do this year, it deserves attention. It really does. And if they're able to, as Jalen Catalon suggested, make him play quarterback, keep him in the pocket, and essentially speed up his process to where he's making these decisions with 2 seconds to throw, something like that, then you'll have done your job successfully and we'll praise you for it. But the issue is if those guys aren't getting home, this could be a long day at the office for the Mizzou defense, and that's the issue.
Yeah, Catalan was like, I remember my freshman year, we played Johnny Manziel, man. We had to get him off of his spot, we had to really.
Man, the BCS was wild. Tell us about it, Unc.
Tell us about it, Unc Catalan. Oh, yeah,
how much do you think Jalen Catalon gets called Unc by his teammates? by all of his teammates the last 8 years that he's been in school.
He's got wisdom from a previous era. And you're right. Let me clean it up really quick. It's not that I'm disrespecting Mizzou's defense. You just got to play complimentary football. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, LSU fan, I can tell you what happens if you can't do that against A&M, but you feel pretty good about your defense in the first half, and then suddenly if you can't move the football. So this is more about not even disrespect, but a tough situation for the offense that you don't want to get on tape saying, hey, we could just make this guy play the position that he could win the Heisman at.
Exactly. If he is making a Heisman case against you, you've done something wrong, and you've probably not lived up to your defensive expectations for this game. All right, Auburn, number 15, Vandy. Vandy's a 6.5-point favorite. The over-under I have is 3 reminders of the Diego Pavia, Hugh Freeze history that we were robbed of because Hugh Freeze couldn't beat Kentucky. Don't cry because it's over. Be happy that it happened. It's a shame. It's a shame.
I mean, I don't know if we should be happy that, to be honest, it feels like we wasted a lot of time watching Auburn.
Well, it was time well spent watching Hugh Freeze and Diego Pavia. I don't regret that for a second. And maybe that's easier for me as someone who doesn't have a dog in the fight and can just watch this play out. But you know me, like I have for a very long time argued against the phrase college football is better when team X is good. I hate that. Can't stand it. It is just such a lazy way of saying the sport is more familiar to me. And I like when, I know who the good teams are. I don't like it when people come up with that take. Okay. Even if it's well-intentioned, to me, like there's a better way to say, oh yeah, like, okay, so college football is only good when Nebraska is good. So you haven't liked college football in 30 years. All right. Congratulations. That's weird. Maybe you should watch something else. But college football was funnier when Diego Pavia and Hugh Freeze were meeting on an annual basis. I stand by that. I will definitely say that. Not getting it tattooed, but I will stand by that.
College football is much funnier when Auburn's good. I think that's just a fair statement. I think that Auburn has had some of the funniest wins I have ever seen in my entire life, and some of the funniest losses when they're good. But when they're bad, it's not as funny. It's just kind of sad. I actually believe Auburn is about the only team that I want them to be good for the sake of the sport, because when they're good, it's so funny because they find a way to both win and lose games. It's awesome.
It is. Truly. Yeah. 2013 Auburn will live on as one of the funniest teams that college football has ever seen. And not for fans that were on the wrong end of those losses, but for everybody else, just like throwing your hands up going, well, this is just inexplicable. This can't keep happening. But, Will, I do feel like we are moving to a different era, and it's a shame. Never rule out the idea of Diego Pavia and Hugh Freeze, one day meeting again, probably on a golf course. Who are we kidding? But, I do wonder somewhere as he approaches his 14th tee on his 5th round of golf of the day, if Hugh Freeze thought to himself, man, look at this. Look at it out here. It's a beautiful day. playing some golf. This beats game planning for Diego Pavia. He's had that thought this week many a time, okay? He's got to at least be a tiny bit relieved that he's not going to go 0-4 against him, because people like us would have reminded him of that at every possible turn. Will DJ Durkin go 1-0 against Diego Pavia? That's a different question.
See,
Don't know.
DJ Durkin being a head coach is also kind of funny. Like, how did we end up here, man? How?
You know, there are always questions when. Do we want to get into this?
We've already done it. Like, you're right. And I'll say this though. Here's another funny thing. So you're right. I would argue every time Hugh Freeze is on the golf course, he's thinking this is better than game planning about Diego Pavia. Second, I'm going to say something that, Auburn fans, you stuck with us throughout. We actually kind of believed in Hugh Freeze more than most. Would it be fair to say, Connor, that Diego Pavia is the exact quarterback that Hugh Freeze hoped he was getting in Jackson Arnold?
Jackson Arnold's taller.
He's got those pro traits, man. You got to believe.
Yeah, it's so difficult because Diego Pavia, I'm not really talking about like his next level evaluation, but the scouting report on him is that scheme is just on his side in ways that Jackson Arnold doesn't ever look like he played with a scheme that was on his side. So maybe with the exception of like 2023 with Jeff Lebby, that's the only type of sample size that we have when it seemed like he was working well within the scheme, and he still was a flawed quarterback at that point as a true freshman, and struggled with the mistakes. But I don't know if that's necessarily the case, because depending on who you believe, from that John Talty story about Tommy Tuberville saying that he told Hugh Freeze to recruit Diego Pavia out of the portal, I don't know that Hugh Freeze looked at Diego Pavia and thought, that's the vision, that's the model for a quarterback, and I'm getting a more talented version of that with Jackson Arnold. I don't know that that's the way that he approached that.
I think just to put a bow on that point, you're so right where it comes down to scheme, whereas that, what you can do with Diego Pavia, yeah, I think it's the leadership and kind of that dog in him that you can't quantify, so I don't want to take that out. But that just goes to show when there's alignment, when a quarterback, an OC, a head coach are on the same page, you can have Diego Pavia. Good point.
Yeah. And Diego Pavia last year struggled against Auburn, really struggled in a winning effort. This was a game in which he didn't look particularly healthy, but Vandy's offense was held to 227 yards. DJ Durkin's unit did its job. And I saw this stat from the Barn podcast covering all things Auburn. The only 3 teams in America who haven't allowed more than 24 points in a game this year are Ohio State, Indiana, and Auburn. To recap, the top 2 teams in America, and then the team that's 1-5 in SEC play.
Not only the 2 teams in America, the 2 top teams in America, 2 Big Ten teams that have played not great schedules that we always joke about, and a team that has played like Marcel Reed and like all these big time teams and limited them. And yet the offensive side of the ball, which Hugh Freeze we've taken all these risks to hire him, that's what stopped them.
It's baffling. Truly baffling. We'll get to more Hugh Freeze discussion with Ryan Brown in a bit here, but golly, do I have some thoughts on that. Vandy is unbeaten at home this year with a pair of wins against top 15 teams since the start of last year when the New Mexico State importation began. 3 home losses, but all of them were to teams that won at least 9 games in the regular season: Texas, South Carolina, Tennessee. Auburn hasn't beat a ranked team in a true road game in 4 years. I don't think this is where that streak ends. And while it is tempting for me to say the ultimate irony would be Hugh Freeze getting fired, and then the very next game, finally Diego Pavia goes down at the hands of Auburn, that would be just so rich, that irony. Always beware of the interim coach energy, especially when it's coming from a guy who, DJ Durkin, does have that power conference head coaching experience. I think that keeps it close. And his defensive game plan, seeing that play out last year, seeing the success that it had against a Vandy offense that kind of quietly has struggled the vast majority of these last 2 games. Now, the final number against Texas isn't going to necessarily indicate that. We can get into stats about like success rate and stuff like that probably would tell a different story of what Vandy did the last 2 games. But I do think it's a 21-17 Vandy win in which we're reminded that Diego Pavia still has Auburn's number.
Yeah, and I love that final score. Honestly, I think not being, reactionary on either side of this, because these are 2 basically take the defenses out of it because they both had solid defenses, and to the point, like Auburn probably is at this point had the better defense over the course of the year when you factor in how unbalanced they've been and how difficult it is to stay focused on defense and not you're one big play away at all times from losing a game if you're Auburn. And they've found a way to, yeah, they've lost some games, but it hasn't been because of defense. And so I say that to say both of these offensive styles that we've seen so far have been able to shorten the game, right? That's a big part of the reason too why Auburn has that the 24-point stat is accurate, because they have had fewer passing attempts. They have had fewer incompletions to a degree, right? But it's keeping the clock running, something that Diego Pavia and Vandy are really known for doing. But yeah, I do believe this is going to be a kind of grinded out game for both sides. I like that Auburn has tried this new thing called an offensive coordinator. I think it's going to help them out a lot. I think having a dude who calls plays who then
do tell.
Yeah, like so with this guy that calls plays and then he tells your quarterback like, hey, you run like trips left, like like you run the play and then you do it again the next play. And it could be a run.
But wait. What down is that? Is that first down? Is that second down? Third down? Like what's the plan changes?
It's every down but fourth. And sometimes on fourth too. That's the thing, because you can do that. So first down, second down could be run pass, and it could be the same guy, and then that way he knows he has momentum. And I think that's going to help Auburn's offense a lot. I'm going to be honest with you. And so that being said, like it seems like they've got the quarterback kind of figured out a little bit, right?
Do they?
Well, they've made a decision. That's the thing about Auburn. They've been unable to make decisions this year. At least they've made a bad decision is better than no decision. So that being said, they at least know what they have. They have the interim head coach energy. So point being, I don't think this is going to be a blowout because it's a prideful Auburn defense and it's an offense that truly could not look worse. And so I still think Vandy's going to win, and I think they're going to control this game to a degree. But don't count out some chaos from interim DJ Durkin. And I mean, the funniest outcome, right, to your point, would be the players rallying around DJ Durkin and being forced to hire him, which I don't think is going to happen, but it would be funny.
The funniest outcome would be Auburn winning this 35-10 with Deuce Knight looking like a star. And he just comes in and balls out. And the two guys that Freeze recruited out of the portal are just on the sideline going, well, we're going to find somewhere else to play. Although I think Ashton Daniels is out of eligibility. Who knows who's actually out of eligibility?
Actually out of eligibility. Like just bump into Pavia on the sideline. He's got some pointers. He's got a guy for that.
I would like to lead the Cam Coleman portal sweepstakes, or that's disrespectful to Auburn. I don't want to assume that he's necessarily going to be on the move. We'll see who Auburn ultimately hires to replace Hugh Freeze, and that could have a very large impact on it. But the Cam Coleman is getting a raise no matter where he goes. We could probably do an entire segment about this, but the teams that have already fired their head coaches who have really attractive receivers that are going to be coveted, big time guys like a Dallas Wilson at Florida, who's out for the year. He played 3 games, and I'm still looking at that guy going, buddy, I would be backing up the Brinks truck to get a guy like him and Cam Coleman. And again, for fan bases that are taking this as I'm saying he's gone. No. I'm not necessarily saying he's gone. But once that 30-day window opens up, you are sitting there on pins and needles going, this is a possibility. Okay. It just is. And there are a lot of those guys right now that when you look at these rosters that you go, man, they could make a team better, and they're going to be really, really attractive. And for a lot of teams across college football, that could be the difference in making college football playoff. And Cam Coleman, gosh, I hope better days are ahead for that guy. I did my dudes who deserve better team to no surprise whatsoever. I just did the Auburn defensive front 7 because their secondaries had some issues this year. If you kind of look at some of those numbers as well, when they don't get home, they kind of struggle defending the pass. But it was Cam Coleman, and then a lot of other guys like that. And I just broke down all the things that the Auburn front 7 has done so well. Auburn needs to get off this list because the 4 years that I've been doing that, Auburn's had the most representation of anybody. That's a problem.
Yeah, and especially with the resources they've invested. Like Auburn loves football, right? And like it's been fundamentally a football school for my entire life. Granted, Bruce Pearl's done some great things. He's no longer there, so they have the ability to transition back into a football school. And so that being said, like, I don't want to dump on Auburn too hard because I feel like we've been nicer to Auburn than probably most people. I don't want people to give us 1-star reviews and be like, you're laughing at Auburn. It's like, no, we just kind of expected better as we have for kind of our whole careers here. And so that being said, I think it is a neutral take to say Cam Coleman deserves better. Be that staying at Auburn and getting a raise and a new offensive coordinator, that's fine. But what he's getting this year is not becoming of a person with his skill set. And like usually on teams like that, you'll hear guys say or fans say, oh, well, you don't know about this story. You don't know about he is in practice. I don't care. Like I've seen what he does at games, and that some of that just goes to show like there's a reason why guys line up to go play for like the big brands, unfortunately, right? With the Ohio States, the Bamas, back OU used to be like this, where it's like you can expect a level of like things running on time. Like you can just expect that the team is going to go a certain way. That's why it was so weird when things went south in Oklahoma with the Spencer Rattler situation, because it was like, dude, for 20 years, this place has been automatic. Yeah, they would lose a weird game, but your quarterback would be in the Heisman. You guys would be all conference. You guys would get drafted. And so when you take kind of a risk, which is what Cam Coleman did to go trust Hugh Freeze, you want to see that boldness pay off for a guy, kind of regardless, because we don't want guys lined up to go play for 4 different teams. We want players who have the courage to say, hey, maybe I'll stay at Auburn and trust this new guy, but it can't be this. It can't be what we've seen out of Cam Coleman so far,
I know that Nico is the one that gets the most attention for this, of the man looking back at the team that he left and, ends up in a worse situation. And he's kind of the poster child for this. And obviously, like, Tennessee suffering that third loss probably changes that conversation to be different if Joey Aguilar was leading them to Atlanta or leading them to another playoff berth or something like that. So it's not as extreme of an example as what we thought, especially with Nico doing better things at UCLA. But Eric Singleton's got to be part of that conversation too, man. Seeing what Georgia Tech has done this year and watching the offense that he's had to play in, albeit banged up a little bit, that's got to be a huge bummer to know that this has played out the way that it has. And you could have been, in lockstep with Haynes King, who he had a really good rapport with. He had that 2-year rapport with. And I understand people are like, well, that he made the bed. That's the bed he made. You got to lie in it. But man, that's got to be another one of those situations that's just tough to look back on.
Yeah,
So,
and I'll say really quick, like there's a level of like jokes that I'm able to tell about like an A&M or an Auburn that I'm never going to tell for like, Mississippi State or Mizzou, because it's like fundamentally Auburn, you're going to be able to get those guys to come choose you forever, because you guys are locked in, you have the donor base. Guys are going to keep making the decision to go play for Auburn. Now, if that turns into be a good decision or a bad decision, that's totally up to you guys. But Auburn's problems are Auburn. It's not, people love the play-ins, people love the program, they love the uniforms, they love the history. So just give them something to enjoy versus going, man, I wish I was at Tech,
yeah, can't have that. All right, LSU, number 4, Alabama. Alabama's a 10-point favorite. The over-under I have is 2 Ed Orgeron references. A few ways to interpret that. The way I interpret that is reminding people that twice in the last decade, LSU has had an interim coach against Bama. They were both Ed Orgeron. Yep.
Yeah.
Didn't officially have the title in 21, but he had already been fired. They just made him the interim coach. He had already been fired. He was coaching out the season. That's an interim coach, in my opinion. Smart move. Let him be his own interim coach. Ended up playing a competitive game against Bama. Also, he went on ESPN radio and was asked about whether he wanted the LSU job, which, you think? He said, quote, "Are you kidding me? I'm one phone call away. I just got to get in my truck. I could be there today."
You know what? And as I'll let you guys know, me too. And I promise I won't leave LSU with NCAA accusations. I might win one game, but I might leave the program in a better shape than Coach O did when he left.
Your kids are getting straight A's, Will. I can just tell. I know you. You're going to have them in the classroom.
We got student athletes here at Louisiana State University under the Willock regime.
Academic All-Americans left and right. Yeah, bring them in.
Point being, that's not going to happen. And if it does, boy, howdy, are we signed up for hell.
The people that I saw quote tweeting this be like, "Oh, do the funniest thing ever, LSU." Breaking news. The man who was paid $18 million to go away is not getting paid 8 figures to come back. That is not how this works.
So it
is just not.
Man.
I need at least 15 years in between this time, okay? And for those who say like, "Oh, you can't go back to the place you left." No, he got fired there. This isn't Rich Rod at West Virginia. This isn't Scott Frost at UCF. Those guys left on their own accord. This is not Ed Orgeron getting $18 million. Anyway, another reason why he could be brought up, he's the last SEC coach to beat Bama in Bryant-Denny Stadium. Technically, Sark wasn't an SEC coach yet in 2023 when Texas won there. Bama's last SEC loss at home, 2019, game of the century. Maybe the most talent on the field ever, at least in terms of NFL draft talent. Do we think LSU interim coach Frank Wilson is going to join that club? We're always aware, interim coach energy. We'll see. Look, Coach O kept it within 10 in both of those games in which he was the interim coach. So it's a very fitting spread for this one. I wonder if the odds makers kind of had that on their minds. Also fitting because Bama's average scoring margin in SEC play is 9 points. Good. Second in the SEC. A&M is first, 14. But obviously not vintage Bama. Vintage Bama wins this game 21-0. We wouldn't have to think. If this game was played in 2016, it's a 21-0 Bama win, and we don't really have a whole lot to break down. Times have changed. They have. And I got to think that Bama is going to be able to run the ball well enough against LSU. It's been an issue for Bama in conference play. It's something that we'll talk about with Ryan Brown in a bit here. But, I think it's fair to say LSU has been a disaster defending the run since this Whit Weeks injury.
Stopped before defending the run there, brother.
They were good the first part of the season, and then Whit Weeks goes down, and they all of a sudden look like they can't tackle anyone in space. Is he going to be back in this game? We're doing this before injury reports come out on Wednesday night. Maybe he'll play, maybe he won't. I don't know. But, man, Bama hasn't been able to run the ball, in power conference games this year. They have yet to run for 150 yards in a power conference game, and that is not vintage Bama. But I think if you have the ball in Ty Simpson's hands, that's all you can hope for. And that's still as good of a cheat code as there is in college football right now. I do think LSU can do some things defending the passing game against Bama. I still trust that LSU secondary. I do. I think they're more than capable of being able to make plays in the back end with a really good Bama receiver room to have to defend. But I think doing that for 60 minutes is a little bit too rich for my blood. I'm going Bama, but only by a touchdown, 28-21.
Okay, I felt like you were baiting me there for the first half of this. So you're like, interim coach,
No.
Martin is going.
No.
Like,
come on.
No, I, it's funny. I remember texting my stepbrother Alan. Shout out Alan. He's a big self-proclaimed Gump, and I remember watching an early, first month of the season game, and I was like, dude, Bama is going to smoke LSU because the things that Bama struggles with, LSU was unable to do. Right? It's like stopping the run, and the things that LSU has weaknesses in, Bama is good at exploiting. Right? Like getting after the quarterback, creating havoc, making good decisions in key moments, calling plays. And so I thought about that back then. And I don't think that Frank Wilson, what's interesting to me, man, I could go a million different ways with this because there's so much about LSU right now and it's going to be ongoing, but whatever. What's really interesting? I'm going to park right here. People talking about practices. Okay. Do you remember when Coach O said that Les Miles was like running guys to the bone? Like he basically lessened up practices when he became the interim head coach at LSU.
Yeah, which it's the opposite now, right?
Yep.
Isn't it the inverse?
Yep. And so just remember this, guys, when a coach gets fired, everything they ever did was wrong. Everything they ever did was wrong. They were the dumbest guy on earth. How could we ever believe to them? And that was my truism for this week of, well, they weren't practicing hard. Well, that's the dumbest thing in the world. Meanwhile, fast forward or rewind to the Coach O situation. Well, they're practicing too hard. Guys are getting hurt. We got to fire Tommy Moffitt. So it's so funny to me. Go ahead.
We should have brought that up, by the way, in the recap. That oversight, that's my fault. My fault not bringing that up for A&M. Could have been lad of the week, Tommy Moffitt, a guy that when we visited the LSU facility, we sat in his office for 20 minutes and talked about it, and I became so fascinated with Tommy Moffitt and the job that he's doing for A&M, is part of that whole Mike Elko conversation.
Oh, yeah.
I should have brought that up when we talked. There was a lot of stuff going on post A&M victory against LSU. So wanted to make sure that he got his proper credit for the job that he's done.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll say this, and that actually the firing happened after the Coach O stuff. So I misplaced that timeline, but just talking about practices, right? Winning cures all. And this is the best example of it I can have. And I promise you I'm going somewhere with this, which is that, okay, when Les Miles was there, oh my gosh, he's this taskmaster. He's working the guys too hard. They're grown men. They need to lead the team. Okay, COVID happens. They lose this record number of draft picks. The leadership on the team is gone. The coordinators are gone. Suddenly these lax practices are like no one's the adult in the room, right? Okay, boom. Then Brian Kelly comes in, changes everything. Oh, Brian Kelly's the adult in the room. That was so smart. What a great hire. Okay, boom. Brian Kelly gets fired. And so it's so funny to me whenever all this stuff happens that we know the answer afterward every single time. So just be aware of that just as everyone's watching stuff. So I say that to say about Frank Wilson, Frank Wilson is not, even a DJ Durkin level coordinator, right? Where it's like, hey, I have this side of the ball to hang my hat on. Now, is changing practices, is, running the power pitch. And Hester had a really good quote about that. He was like, LSU hadn't run power all year. And there's something wrong with that. I agree. But I don't think that a team that has shown this year that, not that they're soft, because I think that came out of the A&M game, and I get that. But there have been points in this year where, especially on defense, LSU has really imposed their will on teams. I don't think that suddenly flipping a switch is going to make LSU into a team that can run the football. And I think that everyone thought, not everyone, but a lot of people think that. Like they're like, oh, well, Brian Kelly was so soft. His softness was causing them to not run the football. Now they're good. No, this is a team that does not have a good offensive line. They haven't been practicing power. So I think that like there's a certain amount that you can do by getting Joe Sloan out of the building, which, hey, couldn't be more fired up about that. But I think in a game like this where Alabama is truly firing on all cylinders, they just had their get right game kind of against South Carolina, where it's like that's the one that you probably should have lost. And so now you can like actually say nobody believes in us. Like let's kind of dial it back. I just think this is kind of a nightmare situation for LSU. Now, a nightmare situation would be keeping Brian Kelly, and that's why I love the firing at the time that it happened. Everything has
I
been
agree.
right. Like everything has been chaos since then. But I think that LSU's best chance to beat Alabama is without Brian Kelly. However, that doesn't mean they will beat Alabama.
Isn't that so weird? Because you're 100% right, and I was going to say that too. I would feel worse about LSU in this game if they still had Brian Kelly, and I've praised Brian Kelly. I have talked repeatedly about this guy is coming in as a really successful coach, and the hope is that he's just going to be it's going to be gasoline on the fire, and all of a sudden LSU is going to be back to winning national championships. But it is so strange how that became such an obvious opinion to have, I think. And it's almost like if Bama knew going into this game that LSU is just one bad Saturday away from implosion. I mean, they've been slowly imploding over the course of the last month. But if they knew that that was what was at stake, then you'd feel like, all right, the ingredients for Bama winning this game by 28 points are there more so than this game. And it is so strange. We will play the results. We always play the results with this stuff. We play the results with the practice strategy and what a team needs. And it's just a reminder of sometimes things just run their course. It had run its course with Brian Kelly. And if LSU is all of a sudden able to go into Alabama and win in just the weirdest way possible against arguably the hottest team in college football, it will be a reminder that we know nothing. We know absolutely nothing. And that's okay. And that's what's made this year a lot of fun.
Exactly. It's like, hey, I talked to my LSU buddies, like, you feeling? Nope, don't see this one, right? And so, point being, like, that's me being very complimentary of Bama. And, like, that's the real story here is that Bama has found a way in all these games. Again, the Bama-Georgia game would have improved, like, kind of two of the most resilient teams in the SEC. A&M, obviously, right there with the late game heroics they've done at different times. But in terms of teams that we thought were dead, like, I haven't really thought A&M is dead as often as I have with Georgia and Alabama because they've been able to control games in ways that those two teams haven't. But that being said, they have this DNA, especially at home, especially under DeBoer, where it's like, it just feels like going into the Roman Coliseum, even maybe more so than some of the Saban stuff at home, right? Because that's where DeBoer has been this just mastermind where it feels so hopeless to go into Bryant-Denny Stadium. So this is a game that maybe at Tiger Stadium I'd feel a little bit differently, with the home crowd, Louisiana Saturday night, whatever. But beating DeBoer on the road we're not ranked, but as a good team, as a team with expectations, I think we can at least say. I can't say they're good, I can't say they're ranked, but I can say they're a team with some 5 stars and expectations going into the year. They're not a trap game. LSU's not a trap game. You got a bye week. So I think the preparation that DeBoer has such an advantage over the chaos that's happened at LSU, I think we're going to see just some absolute not safe for work stuff by Ryan Grubb against this defense, to be honest with you.
Yep, would not be surprised. All right, Florida, 3-point favorites against Kentucky. The over-under I have is 4.5 designed runs for 31 yards for DJ Lagway. Very specific. That is splitting the difference between the 4-carry, 34-yard performance that he had on designed runs, which was his first game without Billy Napier, and the total that he had in the 7 previous games with Billy Napier, 5 design runs for 28 yards. That was a very wordy way of saying he had more runs off designed. He had more yards off designed runs in the last game than he had in the previous 7 games with Billy Napier. We know that DJ Lagway hobbled, okay? Working through some stuff. Breaking news. I don't know what he's currently going through, but I do know that he just had his personal best in terms of rushing yards off design runs, and it beat the 32 rushing yards off design runs that he had last year against Kentucky. That was his previous career high in that department. If you're this interim Florida staff with Billy Gonzalez, you have an obligation to do right by DJ Lagway, okay? You're still, whether or not you want to acknowledge it or not, you're still trying to recruit that guy probably to stay on your roster. Are you going to be so devastated in the way that you probably thought you would have coming into this season if you don't have him next year. Maybe, maybe not. But you don't have to be cautious with him in the same way that Billy Napier very often felt like he had to be. One of the things that Lagway talked about at Media Days, I'm curious if you remember this, was that his freshman year at Florida was his first time ever going an entire season without a rushing touchdown. He still doesn't have a rushing touchdown in his college career, which is kind of wild when you consider what the scouting report on him was coming in and the size that he had. You're like, just get that guy, on the 2-yard line. That's just an automatic touchdown. I still think that there's a chance that changes in this game and he gets his first career college rushing touchdown. Kentucky's been better against mobile quarterbacks, but still a unit that has struggled with missed tackles, and just when it doesn't face a team like Auburn, apparently. And I just wonder if maybe there's a little bit more motivation for Florida. And by the way, me saying motivation is not a dig at Mark Stoops, just kind of came out that way. This game in itself feels like a bowl elimination game. Nobody talks about bowl elimination games anymore, Will. We just talk about playoff elimination games. Bowl elimination games. Bring them back.
Those are much more fun to me at this point, honestly, because that's like, how are you going to spend your whole offseason?
Oh, look, there's something to be said for it. We saw one play out last weekend at Jordan-Hare. Kentucky and Auburn. Kentucky, bowl chances very much alive. Auburn, yeesh, not looking great. And to be clear, if I'm betting, I don't think either of these teams will make it to a bowl game. Florida has a better shot, but I still wouldn't feel confident saying that they're going to end the season not going 3-1, which is what they would have to do to make a bowl game. So I do think this night slate is kind of weak. This game should actually be fun, though. This game should actually be fun. So if you're like, oh man, there's not really a premier game that I really want to watch. If LSU and Bama doesn't end up being like this great game, and if it ends up being a blowout or something like that, flip this one on. I think this game has the potential. It always has the potential to be weird. Dorian's got a touchdown. Some of the moments that have happened, Florida having the touchdowns with the uncovered receivers. What was that back in like 2017? I think that was. Florida's last win in Lexington was actually 2019 when Felipe Franks got hurt. Very gruesome injury. And we got our first real Kyle Trask experience. And it was like, man, why do weird things just happen in this game? And they always, at least to that point, felt like they were going to go against Kentucky. Kentucky's last win against a power conference team at home, we know, we always bring it up, was 2023 against Florida when Ray Davis ran all over them. It's something's got to give game. Cheers to that, Will. Cheers to that. I'll be dialed into this one. Can't wait.
I don't know if there's a rivalry in the SEC that has become more underrated than this one, because if you think about it, man, this was so back and forth. Like it was 31 straight that Florida had won, and there was I
think it was 31 straight up until 2018.
Yes, just like an absurd number. That was it was always Tennessee and at home for Florida and Kentucky that they would find a way to beat these teams no matter how bad they were. They had
Charlie Brown them right in their face
every time. And then over the last couple of years, we've seen again college football has changed. These things haven't been true. And yeah, Florida is a favorite in this game, but it's been Kentucky's series in these last kind of the Mark Stoops versus tail end of Dan Mullen and Billy Napier era here, where it's kind of the quote unquote, what's up?
Whoa. Don't forget, Dan Mullen, that 2021 Florida team outgained Kentucky that day.
They sure did.
Let's not forget about that.
They sure did.
That was decisive.
The papers will never tell you the truth. The final score is it's an amalgamation. Anyway, so that being said, I miss this rivalry. I miss the quotes to your point that would come out of it. What is a rivalry, Connor? Two evenly matched teams with hatred for each other. These are, at this point, two evenly matched teams with hopefully hatred for each other. I love the point that you make about DJ Lagway, and it's interesting. This is essentially what you're saying, but I'll phrase it slightly differently, right? Which is that, okay, DJ Lagway was hurt. So I don't think that it was a mistake to not run him more, okay? But we talked about, and you highlighted the difference in usage with Jaden Baugh as Florida has kind of started to get better at offense. I won't say they figured it out, but I think that it's all come around. We talked about the two freshman receivers. We talked about using Baugh a little bit more. Well, now we're presented with an interesting case, which was that Billy Napier was saving DJ Lagway from himself to a degree and protecting his future at Florida. That if you have this injury, either you're gonna, get hurt and be hurt next year, and it could affect our chances next year if you come back and we're good, or you're gonna get hurt and transfer out of here. So I'm protecting you from yourself. Does that make sense?
Yes, I would agree with that. Yeah.
So now we're in a position, because if you ask any athlete, as DJ Lagway said at media days, give me 20 carries. Give me 20 carries. I'll take them. Let's do it. Well, now with Billy Gonzalez, he knows pretty reasonably he's not going to get this job. He probably hopes to be on the staff, but both the coach and the player are now looking at each other like, you want to send it? You
Yeah.
want to send it a little bit?
Ryan O'Hara, still weird for me to say. My brother's name is one letter different. I've had several people reach out saying, isn't that weird, Connor? Yes, it is weird. Still weird. There is an understanding because he is the quarterback's coach. He's worked side by side with Lagway. He's got a pretty good feel for him. And if you're feeling like, hey, he's ready to go, let's let him do some of these things. Let's kind of showcase that we want to use him in all these different ways. You're trying to make a pitch to that guy of, look, stick around here. We could build around you. You still have this skill set that's going to be really fun to watch. Now, is Texas Tech probably going to drop a bag to get DJ Lagway back to the Lone Star State? Yeah, like of course they are. Cody Campbell probably already has that check written. All right, who are we kidding? That check is somewhere in the Lagway household. Just when you just think about it, those opportunities probably are going to be there, even if they're not necessarily there in the way that we thought they could be coming into this season. But you're right. You've got to kind of show all these different things and show we're not going to be the coaching staff that's going to hold you back. You're trying to find out if you're going to be part of that next staff. If you're Ryan O'Hara, if you're Billy Gonzalez, Florida lifer in a lot of different ways. So maybe he could be. And yeah, I think it's a really good point. I think it's the biggest thing to watch for in this game.
Yeah. So, at the end of the day, I think that Kentucky has been able to win these like kind of gross games. I think like the last what do you think the last pretty offensive game for Kentucky was?
In which they won?
Oh, I guess Tennessee was kind of a pretty offensive game.
I was going to say that's different. A pretty offensive game that Tennessee or that Kentucky won. I would say 2023 at Louisville when we had, what was it? I used to always be able to remember this. This is the problem with getting old, is that useless facts. Some stay with me, some slip away. I can't remember how much Kentucky outscored Louisville by when Jack Harlow was trolling Kentucky, and then they just went off. Devin Leary, best moment at Kentucky. And then Mark Stoops a few hours later, apparently going to Texas A&M. Oh, wait, no, he's not. Too many people oppose that. Weird day, wild day. That's a very fitting that a bizarre day was probably the last time that Kentucky had a big time offensive showing, at least against a power conference team, that it felt good about. Because last year beating Ole Miss, that was not a great offensive showing at all in that winning effort.
Yeah, and you know what's funny? It's like I agree with that statement, right? But that being said, that was still a game where they were 3 of 9 on third down. They only had 16 first downs. Quarterback was 12 of 22 passing. Like that under Mark Stoops under the Mark Stoops standards is the word I'm trying to say. Mark Stoops standards is a great offensive day, but point being, like, say what you will about Billy Napier, but he has had some of these offensive flashes. That's what he was hired to do. So for a game like this to go Kentucky's way, it needs to be an absolute slop fest. The issue with that is Florida's actually gotten pretty comfortable in slop fest too, even though, again, Billy was not hired to do that. The team has been in so many of them that, to your point, I think this could be a really close, fun game where it's like, again, one big break in coverage, one big play, one big risk that doesn't pay off is here. And I'm fascinated to see, kind of like what I hit on in the Georgia game, these big moments for Florida. They were famously so unprepared for the late game situations, the 2-minute drill, the special teams, the fourth down calls, whatever it would be. I want to see like what the new staff has in store for those moments, because all you have to be is a little bit better than Kentucky, who hasn't been great either. So yeah, I'm actually, like I said, I'm fired up for this game. I'm hoping that not all eyes will be on LSU, so maybe I'm just being selfish, but yeah, I mean, I think this is a great 2-game kind of slate to jump back and forth between, because it's two rivalries that, again, I think this one, like, it's hard to put ourselves back even 5 years ago, but this was a big deal whenever they like broke this streak and was back and forth.
Here's a question. Did we just talk about that game more than any other podcast in existence?
I think it's worth it.
And I mean, we'll exclude people that cover the team locally. Obviously, they did. In terms of any national podcast, find you a breakdown as in-depth as that was for Florida and Kentucky. Look, we are sickos at heart. Got to talk about them all. All right, lock of the week. Just missed that Stanford cover. Just missed. Pat Narduzzi he lives to troll. So we're probably back in fade of the week territory. That's fine. Either way, brought this team up before. Texas Tech, 10-point favorite. Huge top 10 showdown against BYU. It is the game of the week in college football. First time Tech is playing in a top 10 game since 2008. Michael Crabtree, Mike Leach, you know what I'm talking about. College game day in the house. Some might be surprised that it is such a lopsided spread. You'll see those teams right next to each other in the first college football playoff poll and go, wait, what? I am not. And that is why I like Texas Tech minus 10. With Baron Morton, their quarterback, they've won every game by at least 23 points. They lost that game to Arizona State without him. This team is top 5 in the country in scoring offense and scoring defense. They've been even better in the trenches than advertised after that massive portal haul. David Bailey is leading the nation in sacks right now. He's the exact type of player that you want to be recruiting out of the transfer portal. I love Texas Tech minus 10. I do. I really do. I think they have a big time statement coming in this one, and they take control of the Big 12 race.
I am, again, so fascinated. You talked about kind of like the almost had it. Like, I have been tuned in like a sicko to each and every one of these, and I feel like I learned more from the lad of the week than I do. I mean, there's a lot of SEC stuff that I learned, as we all do, like with the 7-point swings and all that. But just to be a random game, I'm, again, going to find myself probably tuned into this one. And I, again, don't know.
I would hope.
This specific game, like, I don't know enough about it to, like, what's it called? Like pick it or anything, because we have to be so locked into the SEC. But you've given me a reason to really be locked in and root against you, honestly. So thank you.
That's fair. Hey, look, fade of the week. It's very much that. BYU is 19-2 since the start of last year. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that absolutely nuts, man? Like that, you could tell diehard college football fans that fact, and they'll say, is this real? No, they are 19-2 since the start of last year. Very good program, but feels like this is the time in which Tech really takes control. All right, let's kick it to Ryan Brown. Great to catch up with him as we discuss all things Auburn, that vacancy, little postmortem, Hugh Freeze, Jon Sumr, Ty Simpson's fascinating few months that await. So a lot of great discussion with Ryan. Here he is. For those of you who are not watching Saturday Down South podcast on YouTube and just our audio only, now would be a good time to go on YouTube and subscribe to Saturday Down South, because we have all of our episodes are uploaded in full. If you like watching our individual game breakdowns, you're like, hey, you know what? 2-hour pod, that's really not for me. I really just kind of want to hear about my own team. That's fine. Saturday Down South on YouTube. We're going to have all of those matchup breakdowns. We do every single power conference game. We preview, we recap. That involve the SEC. So we have so much content right now on Saturday Down South on YouTube. We have YouTube exclusive videos, and sometimes we'll do interviews that are just on Saturday Down South on YouTube. So definitely go subscribe. Please do that right now. I'm now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is the next round's Ryan Brown. That rhymes. I've never had to say that out loud like that, but do you say that often? The next round's Ryan Brown.
I really don't, because I would be talking about myself in third person, which I generally don't do. But now that you say it that way, you're right. It does rhyme. Maybe there was some magic in us choosing this name.
It flows. Ryan, a lot to get to with you. Let's start with your thoughts on Auburn being the beauty queen sister and not being a good job, because there's a better job in the state of Alabama named Alabama. Not sure if you've heard of it, but those aren't my words. Those are the words of your next round guest, Joel Klatt, earlier this week. I won't do the thing where I ask you to defend what a guest said on your show.
Right.
I just wanted to simply shout you out for saying, is that where we are? End of answer. Perfect response. No notes.
Yeah, Joel made some news here in our state, which, by the way, we always appreciate. If you're going to say it, something crazy, say it on our show. We're fine with that. I do think I don't entirely agree with everything Joel said there, but I will say this, and NIL and transfer portal has changed a lot of this. But historically, one thing that has been really difficult about the Auburn job is a positive that is also a bit of a negative. The positive is you're in a fertile recruiting ground. Alabama per capita every year puts out as many blue chip players as just about any state. You go look at the NFL rosters per capita, Alabama does well. And a lot of that comes from the Mobile Bay area, which Auburn, it's a couple of hours from. They've always recruited well in Mobile. Birmingham puts out a ton of players. Auburn's a couple hours from there. They recruit Birmingham. Atlanta puts out a ton of players. Auburn's 2 hours from there. They recruit Atlanta well. The Florida Panhandle puts out tons of players. Auburn's a couple hours from there. So you see what I'm saying? You're like a couple of hours from all these fertile recruiting grounds. Yet, you're battling Alabama in Alabama for Alabama players. Not as much now as traditionally they have done. Nick Saban kind of changed that because he expanded the recruiting footprint for Alabama. You're battling Georgia for the Georgia players. You're battling Florida and Florida State for the Florida players and Miami. So while you're in this fertile recruiting ground, you're like, I don't want to use the phrase little sister or sister of the beauty queen, but you are fighting the state school. And I've always thought, I don't know if you agree with this. I think if you've got two schools in a state that are like same level, Power 5 schools, the state school, the university of, always seems to have a little bit of an edge. Have you ever thought about that? Like the one example I can think of that doesn't is maybe like Clemson in South Carolina. But if you think of most states where there's two Power 5 schools, the university of that state generally kind of has the edge. And Auburn's recruiting against that in all three of the states where they do their primary recruiting.
I would agree with that. I think in the state of Florida, you could maybe point to different times in the history and say like, oh, well, Miami is recruited better at this time. Florida State recruited better at this time. But for the most part, I agree with you. And there's just something to be said for it. And, maybe I guess like USC and Cal, that's a different sort of dynamic. But I agree with what you're saying. And I do think it's factored in. And I think it's a unique job. There's no denying that, but it's still absolutely a good job when you consider that those resources are still going to be there. Hugh Freeze, for all of his shortcomings, recruiting at the high school level was certainly not one of them. They were certainly able to get the players that they seem to target in the transfer portal. Like, these things are good. If you were John Cohen and you're allegedly making this hire, as he says he is the search committee, which you hope it's your first football coach who lasts until year 4, including Joe Moorhead and then the late Mike Leach, of course. Who would be the first call that you would make for this job?
I really like Jon Sumr at Tulane, but I don't know that he's my first call, and here's why. Now, I like him enough to be my first call, but I always think you gotta aim high. Everybody's like, oh, you don't want to get publicly turned down. What does that matter? I've never really understood that. If I go, Kirby Smart, let's say, Kirby Smart's going to say no, right? But a Kirby Smart level coach, a Steve Sarkisian level coach, if that's who you want, why would you not ask? You never know. And so they turn it down or they leverage it into another deal. How has that set your program back? And people say, oh, you end up with your 5th or 6th choice. Well, that happens in a lot of places. Very few places get choice number 1. And I don't think that's detrimental to a guy being successful there just because he was the 3rd choice. What does that matter? So I would aim high. Now, I don't really know what high is. Like, I think Summerall is a guy that's in demand, perhaps for LSU, perhaps for Florida. I think everybody wants Lane Kiffin, but you dance that dance when you got Hugh Freeze. So I don't know how often you can go back to the Lane Kiffin well there. But I would certainly ask. I think they were to the 11th hour there. Now, on Lane's side of the story, his daughter kind of talked him out of it. Auburn's side of the story differs from that a little bit. I'm sure the truth lies somewhere in the middle. But, I would certainly call Lane Kiffin. I would aim high. I'm with you. If you're John Cohen, you've got an SEC job. There's only 16 of them. I think you've got a top half SEC job, so there's only 8 of those. And, if you can sell an alignment in NIL and leadership that people are saying Auburn can sell right now, now's the time to strike and try to aim as high as you possibly can.
Yeah, the search can go in a variety of ways, but everybody's aligned on the belief, hey, 5 losing seasons in a row, we need to right the ship. We need to figure this out. This is not Auburn football. This is not an acceptable thing. And being able to get this hire right, especially this time with college athletics, it is so important. I agree with you. Everybody keeps saying like Lane Kiffin is the most fascinating person in this cycle, but he can kind of have an anticlimactic ending and just have a new deal with Ole Miss. We wake up on a Thursday morning and that's the case. But Summerall, man, what would you do if you were him? Because he's the one who feels like now is his time to make a move. He's the one that's at the Group of 5 job. It's not like they're going to the Big 12 next year or something like that. And this market is just set up for him. And he can kind of look at all these situations. I'm not saying he's going to get offered all these jobs. We know that these things are more complicated than that. But if you were him and you were looking at all these vacancies, how would you play this and what would be really important for you?
Well, I mean, I think the importance is you've got to know how well aligned the NIL is. And that's what, people like you and I don't always know. You know it more than me. But, if I'm sitting here talking about the Florida job, I assume Florida's NIL is pretty robust, but I don't know that, right? I don't know if, Billy Napier had to pound the table to get $3 million more dollars to keep DJ Lagway or something like that. I don't know how much Brian Kelly had to, go beg guys for money to build this transfer portal roster that he built this year that badly underperformed. I mean, I don't know what, I don't know what that looks like. Like we used to, it's funny, 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, you'd have discussions like this and you would talk facilities. And I never knew whose on-campus facility. Like facility to me was the stadium. I see that on Saturday, and everybody's like, no, their weight room's subpar, or they don't have the recovery room and all that stuff. And then there was this arms race in facilities, and I saw it right down the road from this studio. An hour down the road in Tuscaloosa, where under Nick Saban they transformed it into some middle of the road college facilities to the Taj Mahal. And that's what everybody did. And now the race is, facilities are nice, but let's get the NIL. And it's harder to see that. Like you can see the facilities. People go to Oregon and they see facilities. They go to Tuscaloosa, they see facilities. I can't visualize the NIL. Maybe I'm told what's there, but how hard was it to get? Is it renewable? Like, was it a one-time gift, or is a guy like, no, I am like my guy at Texas Tech who's like, I'm all in. I'm a billionaire. We're going to win this thing. So, I mean, to me, if I'm Jon Sumr, that's what I want to know more than anything. I can work around some things, but NIL in this day and age, I cannot work around that. So, and I tell you what's interesting with him, living in Louisiana and seeing the way this, the political and the football has so intertwined in this LSU coaching search. I wonder how much that impacts him. I don't know that there will be anybody in that search that is more aware of what that situation is than Jon Sumr.
Yeah, he's had to ask for money in that state and has lived in a place that's very unique. And I do wonder how much of this experience has made him go, wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole, or maybe this is the type of above board alignment that I'm actually seeking. And they're so desperate right now that all of this chaos, if they put on a full court press for me, maybe that's the most attractive thing. But you're right, man. Like it is all about that alignment. It's going to be fascinating to see kind of how he's able to gauge that.
Yeah. And one more thing I would say about LSU, which is interesting to me, is, you can look this one of two ways. Like, I don't know if it was you that said it, but somebody pointed out that the last coach that didn't win a national championship there was Jerry DiNardo.
95, yeah.
Yeah, 95. So, I mean, that's mind-boggling to think that that's how far back that goes. So you could look at that and say, hey, look, everybody that goes there wins. But the flip side of that was the minute Brian Kelly didn't win a national championship in 3.5 years, he's fired. So, there is the ability to win big there, but there's also the expectation to win big there. I think that expectation exists at Florida, but you look outside of Spurrier and Urban Meyer, nobody's really had any sort of massive success there. And why is that? I would ask the same question about Texas. Like, I know Sark had them in the playoffs last year, but Texas has all the resources. They've got all the facilities. They've got state of Texas recruiting. They got all these things. And you're like, okay, so where are the national championships? Well, they got the one,
They've got one post-integration. That's it.
They got the one in our lifetime. So, where are all the championships? So Texas A&M's the same way. Oh, yeah, oil money. I always hear about the oil money at Texas A&M. They're recruiting the state of Texas. God, you ought to see their facilities, man. Okay, so have they played for an SEC championship? Well, no. Well, so they must have won a bunch of Big 12 championships before they came to the SEC. No. I mean, like, it's just so wild to me how you see all these jobs that have all these resources, and then nobody's really ever gone there and won big. And you have to ask why. It's not just because they keep hiring bad coaches. There's got to be something that we don't get.
Yeah, and if I'm him, I'm trying to get as much intel on the behind the scenes stuff, not what athletic directors tell me, because we talked about this when Ryan McGee came on. One of the great sliding doors moments with maybe college football as a whole is Lane Kiffin having that conversation with the USC people, and I think it was the USC AD at the time, who said, we're not going to hit with these big time sanctions. We're going to be okay. We're not going to get faced with all of this. And then don't you know it, they pull the rug out from under him when he gets there, and they get hit with penalties that kind of cripple them in the first part of his tenure there. And if he had known that going in, then maybe he doesn't take that job. If you're Jon Sumr, you can't just listen to what an AD is telling you, because they're all going to tell you all these different things and how aligned they are. So it's going to be really, really interesting. Quick question here, because this is something I've been wondering about as it relates to Sumr. If Auburn is the sister of the beauty queen in Alabama, what does that make Troy? Does it make it like the girl who saw the beauty queen at Chili's or something?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I don't know. Yeah, the girl that saw maybe she was the server.
Mm.
She was the server at Chili's. New to the game, um, group of five school. When I say new to the game, I mean what Troy has been FBS. God, well, I mean, what is it now? 30 years? 20, 25 years? I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. So yeah, I mean, listen, Troy's a good school and it's a good program, but it's not a program that resonates a ton in this state. Just to be 100% honest with you, like when Summerall was there and he was winning, a lot of people in the state could not have told you who he was. Our audience is familiar with him because he came on our show early in his Troy tenure and was a spectacular interview. And that's how you win us over on this show. Like, if you're a coach that's a good interview, we love you no matter what. We will defend you to the end. We're like, no, don't fire that guy. He's a great interview. So that's what Summerall was. It just so happens he's also a very, very good coach. But he was very much off the radar in this state. Like, once it gets past Alabama and Auburn in this state, it is very, very difficult to garner any attention and garner any headlines. Like Jack State, my old school. I mean, they play midweek games. Some people pay attention. People knew Rich Rodriguez just because of previous stops. Charles Kelly's the coach there. Nine and a half out of 10 people in Alabama can't tell you who Charles Kelly is. So it's really, really hard to get those headlines in the state.
Another guy that you had on your show a lot, and I'm not sure how much defending of him you did during the course of these last few months, but Hugh Freeze. We talked about this Auburn job. Now that you've had time to kind of gather all the facts and some of the things that have come out. I don't know if you've read the John Talty piece for CBS Sports and whatnot, but it almost feels like he just didn't have the hunger for the job in the way that maybe you needed to with a post Brian Harsin rebuild or just any rebuild in this day and age in the SEC and college football. What's the biggest reason you think that this didn't work out?
I think Hugh Freeze was very stubborn in the way he used to do things. And I think maybe having success at Liberty was part of the problem, because he went to Liberty and he did it the way he's always done it and had success. But that didn't mean that was going to translate back into the SEC in this day and age. And according to the Talty article, and John's a very good writer, so I trust his sources there. He was extremely stubborn on the quarterback front, to the point that year two, sticking with Peyton Thorne, when apparently they could have at least made a push for Cam Ward, they circled back to Ward too late. I mean, that's alarming. And he missed at quarterback. I mean, the famous Nick Saban line on game day, you can spend money on these players, but if you get the wrong guys, you're SOL. And he did that, especially at quarterback. Peyton Thorne was a miss, and Jackson Arnold was a miss. And there were warning signs for both of them, and he ignored the warning signs. And your assumption there would be it was just the hubris of thinking, oh, I can coach quarterbacks. I'll get the best play out of them. And really, they didn't change. Peyton Thorne was pretty much the same guy he was at Michigan State. And Jackson Arnold this year has been the same guy he was at Oklahoma last year. So, I mean, I think that was the big thing. I had, it's funny, the guy that told me this is, well, I got to be careful how I say this. I had someone tell me that knows Hugh very well about, I want to say it was, he took the job in December, January. I want to say it was in the spring, talked to him, and this was right after he'd taken the job. He had not coached a game yet. And he told this guy, I think I've made a mistake. And it wasn't Auburn. It was how much the SEC had changed just since he had been in the SEC. Like, he was slapped in the face with a new way of doing things in college football, especially at a power school like the SEC. And it was eye-opening for him. And I think he realized pretty early on, I may not be equipped for this. So I think he had doubts about even doing this before he ever coached a game, and it showed.
It's wild to hear that, because it's reflected. It very much is. And, maybe he felt like the only way he could overcome that was digging his heels in even more and showing, look, my quarterback evaluation, my quarterback development skills, they're where they need to be. And certainly it did not work out for him. Let's get you out of here with some thoughts on Ty Simpson. He's third right now in the Heisman Trophy odds. Some might view the path of a decorated Alabama quarterback as kind of boring because we've been there, we've done that. But I think he's fascinating over the course of the next couple months. So many eyeballs on him for all the obvious on-field reasons, the plays that he continues to make, and the way that he's leading this Alabama team. It feels a little bit more like Bryce Young and what he did, as opposed to like some of the great Bama quarterbacks we've seen under Nick Saban. And I think that he might be staring at QB1 or QB2 class like status in this draft class. But what do you do if you're him? Because
I know.
man, 1-year starters in the NFL, like who go to the NFL is kind of trying to say, look, we want more experienced guys coming out of college. But at the same time, you look at a Garrett Nussmeier, a guy who came back, who had been, who was draft eligible. He's finally starting year 4, and then he comes back and we see how it's played out. And there's no doubt that he's lost himself some money. What's been your take just on the Ty Simpson rise? Because I think even if you had optimistic projections for him, I think it's fair to say that he surpassed them.
Well, I will say this about Ty Simpson. I think everyone, or the Alabama fans of the state, love the fact that he waited his turn. You don't see a lot of that in college football anymore. There were always discussions about him transferring out when Milrose started in front of him. And, as Alabama recruited and they're getting these big guys, like Keelan Russell, who was the Gatorade Player of the Year. And there were all the, well, is Ty Simpson going to transfer out and things like that. So I think Alabama fans love him, the fact that he waited his turn and did it the right way, quote unquote. Everybody I always talked to in Tuscaloosa, even before Ty Simpson was the starter, just when he was a backup, everybody I talked to really, really spoke very highly of him. They liked him. They thought he was very reflective of his dad, who's a well-respected coach on the FCS level, Jason Simpson at UT Martin. And they just thought, it's an old cliche, but the old coach on the field, right? That's kind of, he was your typical coach's son. So everybody spoke very highly of him. And then as he played through spring and into the summer, everybody I talked to in Tuscaloosa was like, this kid's going to be really good. And then the other thing I kept hearing was, this is the best receiver room Alabama's had since 2000. So those two things together, I thought all summer long, this could be a pretty good passing attack. And it wasn't bad against Florida State, but that game was such a bad game for Alabama that you couldn't even say, it was hard to step back and say, but Ty Simpson was actually not, for a first start on the road in a losing effort, he actually played pretty well. And it just kind of got overshadowed by the loss. But then as Alabama fans started digesting him, they're like, yeah, this kid's pretty good. The one thing I think he struggles at a little bit is the deep ball. He's had Jeremy Bernard and Isaiah Horton, Ryan Williams, Lottie Brooks open deep, and he struggles to get it to him. The irony there is that was Jalen Milroe's best throw. So you're much better in the intermediate 20-yard and in pass game now than you were under Milroe, but you do lose the deep ball a little bit. And I think that's a trade you would make if you're Alabama.
It's interesting because I had heard in the offseason some behind-the-scenes things that DeBoer was doing to try and, let's just say, quiet the hype with Ty Simpson. Yep. And I almost wonder, looking back now, if he knew and if he's like, I just want to make sure, I see the landscape and how this is going for the guys that kind of built up. And I just want there to be a little bit of that opening of, hey, you know what, maybe there's a chance that he might not be as good as advertised. And if that was a move that DeBoer made, kind of knowing how this could play out, tip of the cap, that's probably the way to do it.
I believe it, but I also thought, Ryan Grubb said back in spring that, if we played tomorrow, this was in spring, if we played tomorrow, Ty Simpson's our starter. And that indicated to me that they were very comfortable with his maturity, that they could say things like that in spring and he was not going to coast all summer. And I think he's shown that that's the type of player he is. But yeah, I do think I think Alabama knew they were onto something there, and the fact that they maybe try to tamp down the hype a little bit, I wouldn't be surprised by that at all.
Last one for you. Question that I find myself asking more and more I watch this Alabama team. Can Ty Simpson lead Alabama to a national title?
They don't run the ball particularly well, but I will tell you this. If you go look at Kalen DeBoer's numbers for what it's worth, they run it about the way he normally runs it in terms of yards per game. One thing I'll give Ryan Grubb credit for, and we looked at this on the show yesterday, Alabama, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I can get them roughly. Alabama in conference play, I think, is 114 a game rushing the football, which is not great. But their carries per game, it's 32, 38, 42, 34. There's the one game against South Carolina where they had to throw a lot more. They only rushed it 23 times, 24 times. They stay committed to the run, and that's important because they really own time of possession against just about anybody they play. They stay on the field. They convert a lot of third downs. They've got a very accurate passer. Another team that doesn't run it exceptionally well is Ohio State. So, Can you win a national championship without running the ball particularly well? I don't know. They've got a weird defense that like everybody wants to tear apart, but then you start looking at the numbers, you're like, hey, you really get the job done. Like scoring defense is good, pass defense is good. Teams have been able to have some explosive on Alabama's defense, but Alabama's defense has won them some games already. So I think they've got all the elements of it. The run game would be the one thing that would concern me when Ty Simpson has that off day, perhaps in a playoff game. What do you lean on at that point?
Ryan, you're the man. We'll do it again soon. We'll do it again on your airwaves. Well, we're doing it again on your airwaves tomorrow, so we'll do it really
All right.
soon.
That's very exciting to me. I look forward to that. Talk some Indiana football with you. We always bring up Indiana with you.
Got it. Love it, man. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Connor.
Before we get to the rest of the podcast, I want to talk to you guys about Kalshi. This is something that is blowing up right now. Maybe you've seen people reference Kalshi in relation to a lot of different things that are going on in the world. And basically, this is a place where you can make money off of predictions. What do we do on these preview pods? We predict things. We tell you, hey, this is how you would bet here. This is how you would bet there. This isn't betting. This is sports trading. This is the ability to make predictions and say, hey, I can make money off of that. If you go to Kalshi right now, you can see that they have markets for a variety of different things. You can predict who's going to be the next head coach at UNC or Penn State or these different things that there are markets for. And the cool thing about this, all 50 states you can do this in. They are legal at the federal level. It's not a state-by-state deal. And so Kalshi has just a wide variety of things that you can make picks on, make predictions on, and win money. It's a really, really cool source to be able to kind of flex some of those prediction muscles. I know all of you listening to this, you guys can see into the crystal ball. So use the promo code SDS, get signed up today, and make yourself some money on Kalshi. Lad of the week. Will, let me, can I start? You mind if I feel like I never asked to start, but do you mind if I start? Start with Brett Lashley. He had the best weekend of any coach in college football. He got a 2-year extension and a raise that, according to Adam Rittenberg of ESPN.com, will make him one of the 10 highest paid coaches in America. And now SMU being private, they can kind of work around some of the, the public whereabouts of these things, whatever. That means that unless they did some weird trickery and they're basing that on incentives or something like that, which never rule that out with these contracts. But if that's pretty straightforward, being one of the 10 richest contracts in college football means joining the $9 million club at SMU. Not enough people are talking about this. He's making $2.5 million this year. Okay. That is 3.5 times what he's making to be able to join that type of club. So he's able to get that contract locked away as they're continuing to be a force in the ACC. And then he goes out and he beats one-loss Miami, where Lashley was before he came to SMU. Now, it wasn't like a firing situation. He didn't necessarily get the wrath that Manny Diaz got, but you get what I'm saying here. That had to feel good. It had to feel really good. And SMU beat a top 10 team at home for the first time since 1974. Gerald Ford administration.
Oh my gosh, going all the way back to Ford.
But think about that, because I assumed one of those Pony Excess teams, greatest 30 ever made, Pony Excess. I assumed that those guys did that at some point, beat a top 10 team at home, but they had a top 10 win in a bowl game and they had a top 10 win. I think it was like at Texas or something like that. So they never did that either. First time in half a century beating a top 10 team at home. They rushed the field. They did the whole thing. God bless this sport. It's cool. It's cool to see stuff like that. And that's why I will continue to push back on college football is better when team X is good. Okay. So you can appreciate like what SMU is doing with Brett Lashley. Really, really cool. And I'm sure Georgia fans certainly enjoyed watching the way that unfolded with Carson Beck.
You just reminded me that we were all reminded that SMU Stadium is called Gerald Ford Stadium. So maybe the curse of Gerald Ford has now been lifted.
What?
Yes, for some reason.
How did I forget
this? There
was
was a weird thing that went around where they had like a trivia thing.
Yes.
That was on their scoreboard, but it was right above that. So they have now broken
Great call, Will.
the curse of Gerald Ford, and the world is their oyster.
Unreal.
That's what they had to do.
Man. How did I not make that connection? That is a fantastic call. Yes, I saw that. I think it was Marler who that came onto my timeline from him. I'm like, what's the name of our stadium? As they're showing it on the stadium. Oh, golly. I love it. What a weird, fun sport.
Yeah. These like Texas money schools, Tech, SMU, A&M, Right. Texas has kind of always been that way, so it doesn't really change for them. But it's like they've been chomping at the bit for 100 years to just be like, everything is here. We have no state income tax. We could give you oil money. Please come down here.
We got Dallas.
Dallas.
Boom.
Not Fort Worth. That's where TCU is. We're in Dallas.
Yeah, we're Dallas.
And so that being said, it's like, say what you will about the state of Texas, but they certainly care about football, and I think, deserve a degree of to get out of the hell that they've been in with the Dallas Cowboys, with Texas football as a whole, the state it's been in the last 20 years. So it's cool to see a team like SMU. I mean, personally, like, I'm not close enough to Texas to know like the culture at SMU, but I'll say I think their jerseys are awesome. I think they're like, they just look very cool on television. And to your point, I think it's cool seeing a quote unquote small school. I know they're rich, but they're historically small. To succeed, especially in that state that can kind of be fighting for recruits. So yeah, I mean, that would be a cool documentary to make right now. It would be like recruiting in Texas right now, where it's like, okay, we got Steve Sarkisian one day, we got Mike Elko, we got Rhett Lashley. Like, who do you want to play for? We got Texas Tech, who their mascot just walks in with a sack of cash. It's the Wild West, man.
North Texas scoring 1 billion points a game, getting votes in the AP poll. No Group of 5 representation in the first college football playoff poll. Interestingly enough, we talked about with Seth Luttrell. Is North Texas a top 10 job? SMU we had ranked ahead of it at the time. So let the record show, we always believed SMU could come back from the dead.
There you go. Yeah, with a little bit of oil money and that football spirit. But yeah, I'll transition into mine. So I'm going to call it the dueling SEC chunguses. This is a word you told me off air.
Chungus?
You've never heard the word chungus. There was a meme a couple of years ago called Big Chungus. It would look up Big Chungus. It was like a version of Bugs Bunny that was.
Should I?
Yeah, it was a version of Bugs Bunny. It was very wholesome, and he was like this chubby Bugs Bunny. As a Big Chungus myself, it's great to see a little bit thicker of a football coach win, especially in the wintertime, especially when you get the layers. Big boys know about layering, okay? When it gets big boy season, you want to get a little bit cozy. You need your big boy. You get you a Jeff Lebby, a Mark Stoops, and a hoodie on that sideline. You know, anything could happen when it's big boy season, okay? Two guys.
Chungus.
Big Chungus. Two of them. An offensive, a defensive, a young, and old. It's like one fish, two fish. One Chungus, two Chungus. Anyway, Jeff Lebby on the upswing of his career, finally getting over that hump for his first SEC game. He was so close. He was tasting victory. He had consecutively just lost these embarrassing games. A fellow Big Chungus betrayed him when this team threw a interception against Florida. Oh my gosh, we were so close. No, the boys locked in. You know, they had the Texas game, which was equally heartbreaking, and you could see a team's character in these moments. Connor, you could see, do we want to give up? And that's what Lad of the Week is about. It's about, even if you some kind of created that adversity, you know, you overcome it. And so to go into this, you know, the way that Mississippi State started, big win against Arizona State, 4-0, ranked. Oh my gosh. And then boom, 4 straight SEC losses. What are you made of, son? What's your character? Are you going to hibernate like a bear, or are you going to come out like a grizzly? That's what they did last week. Yeah, they capitalized on Arkansas's mistakes. That's what you do against Arkansas. That's how A&M beat Arkansas. At the end of the day, you got to capitalize on those mistakes. So shout out to Jeff Lebby getting his offense turned around. Like we talked about, the defense was a story of the early season, but it looks like he's been adjusting. It looks like he's been, despite the results, kind of succeeding. And to your point, he won a bowl elimination game. Now he just has to go 1-2 against Georgia, Mizzou, and Ole Miss. Easy, right? It feels like we know what the one is likely to be there. But that being said, to somehow have momentum after this long streak of SEC losses. All right, now I'm going to transition to Kentucky. Kind of inverse situation. The peak of Kentucky football under Mark Stoops is obviously past. People are talking about, oh, is he motivated? What are people playing for? You know, you have these games that are not these like offensive showcases that they can be in Starkville, but yet you still have the boys playing hard. You're able to win a vintage Mark Stoops game after, again, almost beating Texas. Weird that these guys have that in common. They both almost won a sloppy game against Texas. They kind of flipped. They kind of both played their style of game. One of them was a very low-scoring game. One of them ended up being a high-scoring game. But that being said, Mark Stoops has his one signature "How You Like Me Now" win of the year that he's good for. And at Louisville is still at the schedule, so it's still possible to get another one. You have Florida this weekend, a game that's been that game in the past. So Mark Stoops, we know, again, like, I'm not saying like, oh, this changes everything, bring it back next year. Like, I think this season and the last couple of seasons have been rough for Kentucky fans, but just giving the boys something to look forward to is so impressive, especially at Jordan Hare, especially, you know. And
why do you say it like that? Why did you say it?
Because
like
I got to get it right. I don't want to be Kirby Smart and get it wrong. And so
Jordan
Hare.
Like,
I'm going to say it like my name is Barb. Anyway, so point being, So point being, this was a big week for SEC Chunguses and the boys that have kept their teams in the boat, rowing, as PJ Fleck would say. And I think that you could really see, like we talked about with Sam Pittman,
non-Chungus PJ
not
Fleck,
anti-Chungus,
non-Chungus,
Chungus hater, enemy of the
dude.
Whoa, you know PJ
Fleck recruited Daniel Fa'alele.
Right.
That man is not a Chungus
Right,
hater.
well, that was almost like his Hodor in a way, right? He was like big guy, block. And you know that if PJ Fleck is at the gym and he sees somebody hitting a big deadlift, he's like, you got to work on cardio, son. That's PJ Fleck's vibe. All right.
Okay.
So I'm going to put we just talked about, we love these like sparse weeks because we talk about whatever. But again, that's why like football in this conference can be such a big deal. We talked about this home kind of losing streak from Mississippi State, getting all these combine the fan bases, hundreds of thousands of fans locked in every week and just hoping to finally break through over the course of the season. I think deserves to be like lauded, especially during the playoff time. We're going to start to not talk about the bowl elimination games. We're going to start talking about playoff picture. Those boys are still playing for what they signed up for and not checking out. And there's really something to be said there.
One question. What is the difference between a Chungus and a Hoss?
Oh, man. Glad you asked. Sam Pittman, Hoss.
Not a
Chungus. A Hoss would do like more of an Oklahoma drill with you. Like a Hoss is like that guy's got a little bit more dog in him than a Chungus. Now, Mark Stoops probably used to be a little bit more of a Hoss. It's getting to be a little bit more of a Chungus.
When someone says Hoss, who's the first person you think of in sports?
Ooh, great question.
I have a very specific
Okay,
answer.
who's yours?
David Wells. Definition of a Hoss. Gonna go out, gonna pitch 9 innings for you, gonna give you a perfect game while he's hungover, maybe still drunk. Large man, can take a lot of punishment. You know what you're getting. Hoss.
Yes, and you know what? The exact apex of Hoss Chungus, hefty lefty.
That's a good
one. He is both. So there you go. You can separate those two out into, Wells or like a who is more of like there's a jolliness associated with being a Chungus, I think.
Oh, okay. All right. Sam Pittman. Jolly guy, jolly
He's
fellow.
Jolly, but he's still a Hog.
No?
That's the thing. He is such a like I could see him working construction. Like he's an everyday man's man.
Okay. And blue collar is okay. I get it. Totally. Makes a lot of sense. All right. That'll do it. Please leave us a 5-star review. Especially if you're a Chungus. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the SES Pod, at Set Down South, at TJ Rivera, at Chris Hart. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.